The tree of life, Mount Sinai, the Ark of the Covenant, the throne of God on his flying chariot. We always say God is everywhere, but these four places are special, where God seems to be a little bit closer to us. They're places where God can personally come to us, interact with us, and be near to us. God will walk in the Garden of Eden. He will fly to prophets in his chariot. He communicates from the ark to Moses, and he talks with all the people from Mount Sinai. These places lay the foundation for an intimate relationship with God that many seek. Maybe it is not a coincidence that we read about two of these four places in today's Shavuot service. And the cherubim of Ezekiel further evoke the memory of the other two places where cherubim are also on duty. First, let's see how the appearance of God in Shavuot is different from his appearance in the Passover story. In Passover, God is the warrior and statesman, triumphant in his duel with Pharaoh and the gods of Egypt. He is all-powerful. The word we can use to describe him is transcendent. It speaks to God as being a being above everything, separate from us, being merciful from his vantage point in heaven, and with the concept of being infinite as his apt description. The people go along for the ride here, but it is God's party, and he is driving the bus. But when we get to Mount Sinai, it all changes. God asks for our permission to receive the Torah. Then God descends to see us. He then asks the people to approach him and talks to each and every one of them. Every human sense is activated to the extreme because God is right there for everyone to experience. We call this type of the God experience immanent. That's immanent, just to eliminate some confusion. Immanent with the letter A in the middle implies closeness. So it implies the direct presence of God in our world, interaction on a personal level, and the oneness of God and the created universe, rather than the concept of infinity. Both aspects of God, transcendent and immanent, viewed simultaneously, are together the lifeblood of Judaism. An interesting observation others have made is that Shavuot, unlike the other biblical holidays, does not have a specific date in the Torah. It is literally the Feast of Weeks in Hebrew, or Pentecost, the 50th day, in Greek. It is counted essentially from Passover as the Omer, and is forever tied in this way to Passover. The transcendent God of Passover and the immanent God of Shavuot are tied together as one, because they are the same God, just different ways to appreciate him from our standpoint or perspective. One custom of Shavuot is to read the book of Ruth, which some describe as the ultimate story of loving kindness achieved through Ruth's great sacrifice. Remember, it was also acts of loving kindness that replaced sacrifice when the temple was destroyed. Perhaps loving kindness is the intimate way of worshiping the immanent God, compared to the sacrificial system appealing to the transcendental aspect of God. Ruth is rewarded for both loving kindness and sacrifice. But most devars and commentaries I have seen on Ruth seem to emphasize the loving kindness, and that makes it the right Megillah for Shavuot. Another custom of Shavuot, as we know, is to eat dairy. It is actually taken from Exodus 34:26. You shall bring the choice first fruits of the harvest to the house of the Lord. You shall not boil a kid in its own milk. And actually, this is just one verse, even though it sounded like two completely separate things. The first part of the verse clearly refers to the agricultural ritual of Shavuot. But the second part, on kashrut, can be interpreted in a more spiritual way, relating to Shavuot simply because of its context with the first part of the verse. Meat is related to the sacrificial system, and milk is the nurturing fluid of life, as is alluded to when we say, the land of milk and honey. The wording of the verse suggests we need to have meat and milk separately, and once again we have that duality, the transcendent and the immanent, in the form of meat and milk. The custom, by the way, is not to eat only dairy, but to eat separate meals of milk and meat in a way that ties them together. Of course, today we like a good excuse for blintzes and cheesecake, so the meat part probably gets lost in the shuffle. Now, a third custom is Tikkun Leil Shavuot, the teachings on Shavuot that go on past midnight. I will make a confession that I didn't quite make it all the way last night, but the program, though, of Tikkun Leil Shavuot originally wasn't the way it usually is done now. There was a specific order of study: Torah, to Mishnah, to Gemara, to Zohar. And they threw in an extra teaching on Shavuot, on the 613 commandments, I believe every one of them, in honor of Shavuot. This order represents the four worlds of creation in Jewish mysticism. As the study went on, as the mystics developed this in Sfat, the participants elevated themselves from our lowly material world, where we mostly see God as transcendent from our lowly vantage point, to the higher worlds, where we can see God in a much more immanent and intimate fashion. The mystical character of our world after midnight facilitates that intimacy with God. Both sides of God are celebrated, but in the mystical early morning hours of Shavuot, the immanent God of Shavuot was the true hero. To bring this together, Shavuot drives home the concept of the nearness of the immanent God. He is here, not there, or not just some undefined everywhere. So perhaps this is the real celebration of Shavuot, Zaman Matan Toratenu, the time for the giving of our Torah. It is said that it is possible to see the workings of the transcendent God as creator and master simply by observing the material world. But the Torah is the gift of the immanent, intimate God to our people. And that is what I believe we celebrate today, 7 weeks to the day after we celebrated his transcendence on Passover. Transcendence and immanence are one. Something you can ponder further during the Musaf Amida. Chag Sameach.